There we go.
So maybe what we could do, I've got a few ideas for some things we might, it's an informal conversation today, but maybe we could, most folks know each other. I know, Katie, you've been on before, but it might be worth a real quick round of introductions and then announcements. And then it's an informal discussion. I've got a couple thoughts given who's on the call, but we can keep it completely open, and we could do like a couple short, bits around a few topics kind of a thing, if folks want to do that. But maybe, yeah, quick announcements and introductions. We could even do those at the same time in the same round, something like that. And I'm going to point to my colleague who's appears to be in DC, but I think he's actually in Oakland.
Yeah.
So maybe.
You've got it, and I've got a picture up that was just for our climate club in DC, that looking at the survey we just did at the White House. So that's the rainbows you see coming off the windows reveal where the incandescent lights are, where the fluorescents, and where the LEDs are at the White House. And the one that one isn't it? That's one of the chandeliers that's still incandescent. So one of our next targets and things. Anyway, I'm with Mobile Climate Science Labs, this climate education specialist at Lowell School in Washington, D.C., where I spend about 6 weeks of the year. And I'm going to just mention another thing to be a tie-in. I also, one of the things I do active in California, part of the Oakland Urban Forestry Forum is a lot of battles around trees and climate change. So how about, let's see, we always tend to favor people. Nobody's new here, but Katie, you're not as often as everybody here. So can we go with Katie?
Sure. Hey, everybody. I'm Katie Wolfson, she, her pronouns. I am the School and Public Programs Manager. I got my job title right. School and Public Programs Manager at the UCAR Center for Science Education. So we're based here at the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Boulder, Colorado. And so we do a variety of STEM outreach, field trips here to the Mesa Lab, exhibits, kind of focused on weather, climate, or system science, as well as outreach into the community. I can popcorn to Mark.
Hi, everyone. Mark Panage. I'm a couple of hats, I guess, in this context. With a nonprofit, started a nonprofit called Make Knowledge, and actually be presenting next week here on some climate pathway topics. I want to get some feedback on framework we're developing around how to think about climate pathways. Climate to career pathways in particular. And yeah, involved with a bunch. I split my time between California and the East Coast, and in California involved with a bunch of other kind of like the California Environmental Literacy Initiative and its green career focus, and some of the other school climate collaborations that are happening out here. Carolyn.
Oh. This is also Merlin, by the way. Apparently he wants to join the call.
Hi, Merlin.
Carolyn Burns, she, her pronouns. I work at the Clio Institute, which is a nonprofit headquartered in Florida. Our focus is on climate education and advocacy. I'm in the Tallahassee office. Colleen, you want to go?
Sure. Thanks, Carolyn. Hi, I'm Colleen Fisk, she, her pronouns. I work for the nonprofit Renewable Energy Alaska Project, and I'm the education director. So I do K through 12 outreach, teacher trainings, public presentations, and yes, appreciate Merlin. Oh, I got a couple dogs hanging out here with me. So, always having the animals is important. I grew up and I live on Dina Ina lands here in Alaska. And I do have an announcement, which is I can't make your presentation next week, Mark, but we just published a Clean Energy Careers in Alaska little booklet. So it's available for download on our website. You guys can check that out. We tried to find, have resources for where youth or whoever can get training on different types of clean energy careers in Alaska, and kept it like a really broad definition of what that energy career is. So including things like plumbers, for example, is still pretty important as an energy career. So we have that. Feel free to check that out. And yeah, REAP has grown. We're now at 13 people now, which is crazy, because when I started 7 years ago, we had 4 people and a half-time office manager. So, and several of those folks are working on workforce and capacity development for people in communities around the state. So I'm teaching a camp next week, so I won't be able to make the call next week, but I'll be excited to check out the recording. And let's see, Deb.
Hi, Colleen. I was interested in the group originally because I was playing with a solar powered toy for kids, and I've written about the environment, and I still think this is one of the best news sources for what's going on and what people are dealing with. So thank you. Who hasn't gone yet? Is it Gina?
Gina and Frank both? Yeah.
Yeah. Frank, you go ahead.
Okay, I'm Frank Gratcha from Portland, Oregon, and I wear a number of hats. I'm a retired community college geoscience instructor, part-time faculty at Portland State University, teaching climate science for non-science majors. I'm on the board of advisory board of what's called Creation Justice program at Ecumenical Ministries of Oregon, and also a representative of Quaker Earth Care Witness to the UNFCCC events. And this week, SB 58 just started, and I'm here at home participating in that conference virtually. An interesting experience, terribly confusing. So Gina, it's yours.
All right, thank you. I am Gina Fiorelli Duranla. I am the Clean Program Coordinator. I do have an announcement here. So we are closing our needs assessment soon for Clean, and we're just trying to get teachers' views on what they need. If Clean is serving them properly, or if there's anything else that we could be doing to serve them. So if you know any educators, feel free to pass this along. And I don't think there's anything else going on. We just had our, I know we don't talk about the educational resource side of things on these calls very much for Clean, since this is the network, but we just had our review camp and passed probably between 30 and 50 new resources, so that are going to be in our collection. So that's very exciting. I just wanted to share that too.
Great. I think
Deb,
we got.
Did Deb go?
Did we get? Yeah, Deb went. Yeah,
Deb
I think we went. I think we got everybody. I'll just really quick. I'm Eric Capel. Normally I'm in Oakland, California, but I'm in Highline Park in New York City now. We're taking a couple of weeks of traveling. First week in New York, then Chicago to see family. And announcements. I thought maybe I'll connect that. I just knowing who's on the call and hearing some of the things that you're working on. I had a couple of thoughts. So one is maybe big picture. I've been working with Mark and Jim, although we've had a little bit of a hiatus from it, but we're going to maybe pick it up again, planning a career and internship, green career and internship fair for students, young adults. But I'm also looking at maybe having it being a teacher-facing event as well. And just for the two of you, August 26th in the Bay and maybe to make it more broadly applicable, Colleen, to kind of what you're working on, and Gina, what you're working on, would be the idea of kinds of resources. Sorry, got sirens going on back here. Kinds of resources and things that would be relevant for internship opportunities while they're students, so during the school year and during the summer. And then from a teacher-facing side, going into the school year, what kind of things, especially around climate education, or the beginning of the school year. So that's maybe a frame that we could start with. And then another thought, maybe as a second topic to look at, is something that Frank and I are working on, which is the idea what he just mentioned: remote access and attendance at large scale COP events, like what's happening in Bonn now, and like the conference that will be happening in Dubai in I think it's November this year. So the annual climate conference that moves around the world, and this year is in Dubai and the following year will be in Australia. So just those are two thoughts, but if other folks would like to jump in with any topic ideas or things that you're working on that you think you'd like to kind of pick the collective group's brains here today, that would be totally fine. And Jim, I see your hand, so
Yeah,
jump in.
that's exactly it, Eric. If I could ask maybe 5-10 minutes at most time of feedback on a project on different things, and it relates to environmental justice and action on climate change, but disparity of the amount of trees that are around schools, and Oakland is a great example. So that's the subject matter. It's something that's pretty hot in Oakland right now. Thank you.
Thanks for that suggestion, Jim. I think we can start there. But anybody else have thoughts, ideas? Katie, anything you're working on at UCAR that you want to share with the group, or you're looking for feedback on?
Yeah, I was just thinking that as you're saying that we have a couple Smithsonian affiliate summer interns starting next week. They're going to be hybrid, and they're going to be working on creating a teacher resource guide to accompany as like a pre-post activities around our climate change field trip that they come here. So I'm going to be having them as part of their internship, kind of looking through resources that already exist of lesson plans and activities that we have through our learning zone here at UCAR website, but also I'm going to be sending them to looking through clean resources. And so if anybody else has any other good places and resources, I think clean obviously is the go-to place, but any other things and opportunities that I can point our interns towards, I would welcome those ideas from this group.
Great. All right. Any other thoughts for the collective? All right, well, maybe let's start, Jim, with and I'll just, full disclosure, I'm looking at my iPad. It's at 36% charge right now. So if for some reason I drop off, I'll baton it over, Gina, to you to finish the call, but I think I'll be okay.
Okay. And Eric, if you need to cut off your video when you need to, that can
Good
help.
idea. Yeah, I might do that go ahead. Yeah, that's a good idea, Jim.
Been down that road. It's hard. So, okay, thank you, Eric, and thank you, everybody on this. Is what I want to do is a project that it's been a project on that could work for a bit, but there's some reasons in Oakland where it's come up, and kind of looking for general feedback, but also the thing of putting out in our networks. If there's others that could see benefit from being collaborative on this, we'd want to take advantage of it. If not, it's good. We all can throw out different ones. I'm going to frame this, and I'm going to screen share in a minute to give us the specific example I'm looking at. Looking at action on climate change, the tie to nature, the tie to trees, but also the power when young people are involved, when they have action they can do, is I think we can see these coming together. So Oakland, and I also work in DC, it has the same part where there's quite disparity between some parts of the city and other parts of the city of environmental justice, of where people have. So I'm going to show the particular place where has been just a case where the school district wants to cut down one tree that would represent 10% of the entire urban the canopy of that school. So this is Oakland Tech. Can people see that? is it come up okay? Google Map. Okay, so this is Oakland Tech's property right here with my little arrow. And I'm going to zoom on the tree that has a red tag on it right now and is looking to cut it down. And the city in Oakland, the Oakland Unified School District basically have a policy that large trees should be cut down because they need to be maintained. If they're not maintained properly, then limbs tend to fall off, as in nature trees when they get older. If you don't trim them and take care of them, then they become a liability. So it's best to cut them down and replace them with little trees. So this is a battle on this. So this is one school. Next to it is a famous private school called Park Day Middle School, or Park Day School. I figure it has about 1/4 the footprint of Oakland Tech, but 4 times the trees. So it has 8 times the amount of tree canopy, a private school versus a public school right next to each other. I'm going to stop screen sharing a second and show you another school in Oakland that is up in the hills. No disparity to this, but this is a school that Tom Hanks went to. And this is, did I do this right? Do you see another football field coming up?
It's only
See
showing
the
the
top.
of your screen.
Yeah,
Oh,
there you go.
we go.
There you go.
It
Oh, that's
loaded.
the Skyline High School up in the hills. And you can see there's considerably more trees around this. And Oakland is full of this. Down on the lower lands, the amount of trees are going, and they're cutting them down. And up in the upper parts, it isn't so much. Now, we've compared a whole bunch of schools and a whole bunch of different things. But one of the places we found in California where there's a large facility funded by the state of California that looked the most like the schools down in West Oakland was San Quentin Prison, right? So, I mean, you got the schools, like, they're looking more like prisons than they are places with places where kids want to learn and feel connected to nature and so on. In any case, this is a thing that can be an environmental justice case, but it's one where the students can be involved in taking action. They're not just learning about climate change and doing things and seeing if anyone else would do that. Now, the nice part about this particular case, this is very unusual. I deal with tree cases all the time, and trees are being cut down in Oakland all the time. I also am a kind of the resident expert in Oakland of how you file appeals and you fight these things, and had the community take it on, and the district just back down today. They said they're going to keep the tree. That's very unusual. They usually cut them down, and we've had other schools and things like that. In any case, an example of what I wanted to tie into, clearly, why did the city and the district do this is because usually these cases don't involve large numbers of students, and students were getting behind this, and it could change the whole equation. So there's the thing of the power of young people to make change, to be taking action. So I don't have a whole lot more than that, just to see if there's any connections, if there's any places. Carolyn, this one probably doesn't qualify, but I'm always looking for places that you all can, that might just be a case that you can do in Florida that DeSantis can't really get on your case too much about if students take it on. So anyway, I'm always thinking about you, Carolyn. And I don't know, but in Colorado, I don't know how much do you have the differences of some parts of a city. Some communities get one treatment and some another. That's it. Just comments. If we end up moving on, I won't be offended.
Jim, I've got a couple connectors. Would you mind screen sharing the Google view of Oakland Tech again? Because I could give a little context on that school too. So, looking at tech, the project, I'm actively working with students at Tech as well, and been working on a project for the last couple of years. And what we're trying to do is essentially map Oakland Tech's green assets, so all of its sort of environmental, both programs and infrastructure. So, like with this bird's eye view that Jim gave us, and that the oak tree was at risk. If you zoom out, Jim, and you go to that cluster of buildings with solar panels south, or on this view, it's technically, yeah, it goes go down below where it says Oakland's. Yeah, zoom in a little bit more, and keep going, and then let's see, I can get my bearings here, and yeah, and then go a little bit down. What I'm trying to get us to, right there, Jim. Yeah, and then go, yeah, stop there for a second. So, oops, wait a minute. Go slightly to the left. Yeah, a little bit more. So in this area that we're, oh yeah, so see where those, yeah, a little bit more. That area there is a courtyard, and just slightly more to the left is the whole garden. So basically, that green space is Oakland Tech's active school garden. And Oakland Tech, just for some context, is probably the most sought after school right now for students to attend in Oakland. So it's a very well kind of received school. They have 3 periods of AP Environmental Science programs that focus heavily on climate education. They're expanding to 5 next year. They're bringing on a second teacher. And so this space was doubled in its capacity in terms of that green cluster, that rectangle. That was Joe Sen, the AP Environmental Science teachers' initiative to double the growing capacity of the school garden. And again, when you zoom out to the level that Jim is looking at, you can see that the green spaces are so limited on this campus. And you can see it's mostly dedicated to asphalt, parking. You've got the AstroTurf field, so that's not even real grass. And you got more concrete. So the idea is the students assess the school for things like green canopy, green landscapes. So this juxtaposition, Jim, with that neighboring school is incredible to see that a local private school has so much larger percentage of green space dedicated to its facility. And I think this speaks volumes to the idea of there's huge efforts to green schools right now, and yet, predominant schools within the city of Oakland are mostly asphalt and are surrounded by fences and are more, like reminiscent of prisons, as you said, Jim, than they are of learning environments. So I just, it's just neat that you're bringing this up and that you were able to kind of fight that good fight. The green space in front of the school is the other large green area with some nice old trees as well. It's just a beautiful old campus. It's nice that they've kept the old building. There's a tremendous amount of solar panels on the roof, and that was sort of revealing to me when we zoomed out at this level to see how many panels they had. And sort of the next question that I come up with is what percentage of the school's electrical energy is being produced by those panels. So those are the kind of things we're trying to have students assess. And then there's the things you don't see, like active recycling programs, active composting programs, energy efficiency programs, water conservation, rain catchment. So these are all things that, a LEED certified building would have to go through getting all of these checkboxes checked off. So anyway, I present all that context. And then I also attended as a student Skyline, that the other school that Jim shared, which is in the East Bay Hills. It is naturally in a park area, and it has a lot more tree landscape. But anyway, I thought that context might help folks think about your own schools in your own areas and what you see happening, or if there's similar challenges where you might have limited green assets, and those limited assets are also still in jeopardy, like this oak tree that Jim's been pointing out.
And Eric, if you don't mind a bit of a dialogue here, if having been working on that, there's climate action that that young people can really be leaders on and really do things. I can speak to, you do have to work at finding projects and cases where that actually works, where they can do meaningful things, big things, but they don't have to say I have an engineering degree, or, they don't have to be working somewhere. They don't have to have certain credentials. They can be listened to. There's some work, and not every case can do that. And just, certainly with you and me and maybe Mark, being local to this area, we can do that. But I think of course, I want to make this, if we're taking time of clean for a little bit here, it's something that benefits the whole community. How do we learn from each other about projects, programs that where young people, and young people can look back and say, we really made the difference on this. We led on this and we won. That is incredibly inspirational. And, when we've got climate anxiety and depression and things, that's recognized, that's the antidote, right? Well, we have to work on our vaccines, right?
Well,
anyway.
and just piggybacking on that, looking at the coverage of that one oak tree that was in jeopardy, it's as big as the garden space down below. Right? It's literally the same square footage. That one tree is would cover that whole garden, and that garden is invaluable for so many students to learn about urban farming, about sustainability. building healthy soils, buying local produce, donating produce to people that are in need, that are most in need. So 100% agree. Finding these win-win opportunities and where student voice actually leads to action, leads to success is a tremendous, powerful tool.
And by the way, Eric, see all this whole space is like dead grass and dirt. They've planted this one little tree here to replace another one. I mean, this place has no educational background. There's no places the kids can't go. There's no tables. There's no benches. I photographed every inch of it. I looked because there's all kinds of questions about irrigation. Like here's educational space, but it's basically it's an empty space, and they were going to make it into just a patch of dirt, 200 feet long.
Frank's got his hand raised.
Yeah, one of the things I'm looking at with that, you've got an excellent sort of laboratory here in some respects. There's one of our faculty at Portland State does GIS mapping of heat islands. And so he's basically got the entire city mapped out in terms of where the hot spots and cold spots are in the city. And as I'm looking at that you had that image of Oakland Tech, I'm looking at it from a number of perspectives. First of all, you have the private school next door that has a great deal of canopy, and then you have Oakland Tech that's missing a lot. You've also, I would imagine, Oakland Tech probably has a GIS program. And that might be an interesting project for them to take on that could be a little bit more substantial marketing point, if you will, for students to respond to the city's usual routine, or the school district's usual routine of, oh, it's a danger, just cut it down. And it could even tie into that issue that you were talking about in terms of the amount of solar panels and how much electricity, how much power that those panels are providing, and whether or not those panels will work a little bit better if you're not having to cool the school off quite as much. Anyway, just some loose thoughts.
Yeah, I appreciate that connection between energy consumption and green landscape, sort of the local urban, the local heat effect. Any other thoughts? And I can't see everybody's hands necessarily, or maybe Jim, you could maybe stop sharing for a sec, and then we can kind of go around the room and see if other folks have thoughts. Pauline, go ahead.
Yeah, I'm there's, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Green Schools investigations that Project Learning Tree has, but we're currently teaching a course with the Alaska Project Learning Tree, like the crossover of energy and green spaces. And so one of the investigations is called site investigation, and it looks at like how much green space there is. And so there's something that's like, if that's something that teachers, if you're working with any educators who might want something that's already, a lesson plan that's already designed, that they could potentially use that as a way to explore that. But I'm also, because I'm teaching this virtual class, I'm just wondering if there's something written up about this already, so I could share with the 10 teachers who are taking this class with me to kind of show them, here's a real life application of this sort of investigation being done by students. Or
Pauline, I'd be glad to work with you offline about my part of the story around the green assets, and maybe Jim, I'll let you jump in on the tree.
Sure. And Jean, Colleen, let's see, since moving this up to like a project is a newer thing, so I don't have it fully out. The one thing I can do off the top is pretty easy on my component. I can send you what was sharing among the community that got us, that we were ready to file the appeal and things, is simply some Google links. I know this is a pretty cheap thing to do, but more of these comparisons where you can see them, and then we can add in Alaska and everywhere of like when you just see these different schools and how they're treated. I think people can do a little exploring right of their own. That would be one. And hopefully now we're going to have a story, because in this case we have a rare easy win in the sense that I heard about this less than a week ago and got involved, and we got the appeal going. As soon as they heard they had an appeal and they heard the students were involved, they backed off right away. That's incredibly rare, but to have a win it's good to have some wins. If that'll help, I'll get you some of those, Colleen.
And Mark or Katie, I'm not sure whose hand was up first. I'll let you all arm wrestle for next.
I can go quickly. I dropped it in the chat too, but I was just looking real quick at some resources we might have around it. And Globe Observer has a trees project that has a free app. So not a case study in student action, but a tool that students might be able to use to measure heights of trees and estimate that. And I was looking quickly, I haven't read through them myself. There are some research reports by students using the Global Observer report, and one of them that popped out to me was impacts and consequences of trees on high school campuses. So you might take a look at that too, or share that with students who are taking action as part of the story. And it looks like there's some other resources tied into that of kind of benefits of trees. So just wanted to share that as a resource too, or maybe even a launching off point of some more connections with folks who are kind of working on that type of project or asking those types of questions. Maybe they're taking action at their schools too.
Definitely appreciate the link to both of those resources, Colleen and Katie. I think that's a reminder about how much is out there and leveraging kind of the field of things that are there. And then just a connector, Skyline, I'm gonna jump to Mark. Jim, Skyline also, there's a teacher there, his name is Samitra, who just did just connecting to what you just said, Katie, and he did an extensive inventory of the entire campus's trees on Skyline's campus. So I think the comparison contrast just between two schools in Oakland, two public high schools, would be pretty powerful. So Mark, I'm going to jump over to you.
Yeah, I mean, it just brings up a few quick random thoughts. For student advocacy, like there's on the negative side, like highlighting the negative of, there's been some interesting science research. I just saw it resurface about the correlations between about schoolyard tree cover and student performance, and whether, I haven't dug deeply into it to know whether it's that temperature is impacting performance directly, or if that it's just a correlation back to parental household income. I'm not sure. But it's been done in different places, and so it's interesting and might get the attention of school leadership. I think the other way to get, for students to grab the attention of school leaders is to offer things, right? And I think that we're lucky in this area to have green schoolyards in our backyard, and also some of the recent grant funding around school forests. So there's some organizations and California state funding from two different sources, I think, that help leaders to implement regreening their schoolyards. I think, like, for students to be able to elevate that stuff and say it's not just about here are the negatives, but also here are some carrots that we should be thinking about as a community. And I think that one last thing, which is sort of bridging Eric's original proposal, like I often think about what's the leadership, like what the site, like we haven't talked about the site, who's the head of school at Oakland Tech right now, and how does she or he see her job, right? And why is that not mentally necessarily part of that? And so I think for me, the school leadership mindset is such an interesting area to probe. And not that it's in opposition to student action. I think these things can come together, but whether these values of greening the schoolyard itself and having students learn by doing and things like that, whether that is on the mental map of the school leader, I think is a really interesting area for us all to be thinking about.
I think ripping off of that, Mark, too. So I've been working closely with Berkeley Unified and Oakland Unified school districts, and there's definitely a gap when you have the education teachers and the learning that's happening. That's one side of the house, but then you've got facilities teams that are responsible for the campuses and the greening, and oftentimes those two departments don't work well together. There's no connection between what facilities is doing and the fact that they're in charge of creating a learning landscape, And if you're walking the walk and you have those panels and those green spaces and the learning that ensues from those spaces, and then showing, like you're saying, that the reports that show when you don't have access to the outdoors, what that means in terms of learning. So I think that connecting the dots between departments, and then to me that goes all the way up to the district superintendent, right? And is he or she driving some of these initiatives and getting his or her departments to play well together in a way that synergizes and creates a learning landscape, both from a curriculum side and learning side and from an infrastructure side. So I appreciate those thoughts. Frank, go ahead.
Sorry, I completely forgot to put my hand up. But really quickly, what I had put in the chat is a couple of links over to Vivek's work here at Portland State. So.
And maybe picking up on the idea of, students driving and student career and internship opportunities, and Jim's idea of student voice and student wins. Like, I feel like if we do create this internship and career fair, putting student voice up front, and one of students that we've been working with, her thought was not just aspirationally what students would like to see, but what students are already doing. So this student is a student we've been working with. She's in Fremont Unified School District, and she's basically created a state-of-the-art kind of looking at landfills are basically generating a ton of methane emissions. So she's essentially had a thought to put in tubes that branch off and collect more methane out of the landfills than they currently do. Because right now, when they capture methane out of landfills, there's a straight pipe that goes down and will capture the local methane emissions coming out of the landfill. But she's sort of has this brainchild idea of putting little roots off of these pipes that go down into the landfill to capture a tremendous more amount of methane. And this is a high school student coming up with an idea. So her point was showcasing active student work that's happening, not just aspiration. Sometimes we think of students only as advocates, but not as folks actually taking meaningful action at so many different levels. So definitely appreciate that piece. And I think us showcasing that in an intern and career fair would be really, really powerful.
And Eric, if I could bring up a thing of what students get to see when they actually take action and have to fight through things. Again, I'll give you a broader one on Oakland and what's already happened here is, on the one hand, if you focus on, say, community involvement, engagement of, say, going, and Oakland is one of the cities that first had a climate action plan like 15 years ago. And now it's on a second one. It had an enormous climate action plan with all kinds of things, and the Sierra Club and everybody got behind it, and they're all very happy. We got a big climate action plan. Well, we look back, and within 2 months, the city had abandoned the climate action plan on the excuse that it was too ambitious. We were doing so many things that we don't have to do any of them. When the students have looked at preservation of trees and working on them and actually, making things happen, and then seeing the city says, no, we want to cut them down, what students learned was there's an internal policy of the city of Oakland that is 180 degrees different than the public policy, the climate action plan. Among staff, as I have found by interviews and looking at, and the city council knows it, there is a different guideline. And this is the guideline I think is really important to us in climate education. Get this. The city of Oakland, what it does and does not do with its urban forest will have no material effect on climate change. In other words, our city, no matter what we do, won't change how many degrees, how bad the hurricanes are. And therefore, since we will not have a material effect on climate change, we will not use climate change as a criteria on anything to do with trees and urban forest. That is the private actual practice. Now, students only learn that when they go and they deal with things and they have to go up against the things, or they actually protect these trees when the city wants to cut them down. So, I mean, it's kind of an interesting thing that I think that the environmental movement is Achilles' heel is it puts all the attention into getting policy and doesn't look to what happens if the policy is actually implemented. And so politicians learn all you have to do is promise these big promises, and everyone goes away, and you're free to do whatever you want to do. Anyway, thank you.
Thanks so much. I think that's a reminder. Yeah, I appreciate the reminder about the synergy between city ECAP programs and districts. There's a number of efforts in the East Bay where we're trying to look at cities, ECAP plans and school districts, and how there's a lot of overlap between those two. Any other thoughts or connections to other areas? So just green schools in Alaska and Colorado and Florida. Just kind of looking around the room. Deb, remind me, I forget what your geographic location is.
Oh, me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in Jersey. I'm looking up like USGBC green schools and LEED
Nice.
certifiers, and if there's apps for solar radiance, so they can kind of like stand in the shade or stand in the sun and kind of get a sense of how hot it is versus, I mean, it's such a, like Frank was saying, it's so severe. You can really tell the difference between that one little bit of shade, how much energy is coming in, the temperature difference. So I'm in Jersey. They have a climate change curriculum. They have green clubs here, and most of the facilities are done by PTAs on playgrounds and recycling, which is not facilities and not always solar. So yeah, there's a lot of gaps.
Great. Well, thanks everyone for your thoughts on this. I think Frank had requested just really quickly spend our last few minutes together on remote access opportunities to large-scale climate events. In particular, we're talking about COP opportunities like in Bonn this week, and then the larger climate conference. And again, just reminding folks that the chat is saved by Clean, so all these resources that folks are dropping in are available when we're doing the webinars as well. So definitely appreciative of all those ideas. And I'm at full disclosure, 13% of my iPad. So again, if I do drop off, Gina, for the last few minutes, but Frank, go ahead.
Okay, really quick. I figured since Katie was here and also since Jim's here, and it definitely doesn't exclude anybody else from the conversation. I'm going back to, I'm thinking back to a conversation I've had over this call over the past years about remote engagement, creating in our communities remote engagement for to the UNFCCC events. And one of the reasons why I briefly wanted to bring this up is because we do have, because Eric and I have been talking about seeing about getting the chief science museums in the Bay Area involved with being hubs for community engagement with COP28, which is a really important, it's pretty critical at this point for a number of reasons I'm not going to go into editorial comment about. But in addition to that, Eric, you and I haven't shared this yet, but I've been in conversation with Don Haas over at PRI. They're beginning to talk about how that might be happening. And Katie, I know you're at UCAR, and I'm throwing out there the idea that maybe one of the projects that Clean could help mobilize is getting a constellation of science museums across the country to function as hubs, gathering places for groups that are somehow connected in with what's going on at these UNFCCC events. Incidentally, the important political point, I'll be happy to share this letter with anybody at any point. There was recently a letter from members of Congress as well as European, the European Council that went out to UNFCCC staff as well as the president of European Council and Joe Biden, saying the leadership of this current COP really needs to be changed. Because for those of you who aren't privy to this, the UAE, which is an OPEC country, essentially elected one of their own, as in a CEO from the national oil company, to be the president for the COP. So there is a crying need to get more people using all the skills we learned in Zoom to get in there and let these guys know that the world's watching them.
And I think about this from, just to put it in context, for the larger scale. So a couple things. One is, COP is an annual thing, and we think of this big push for 2 weeks to really make some change, but we know that the climate efforts are year round. So the idea of not only virtual engagement at this 2-year signature event, or let's say with Bonn and the thing that happens this time of year, but we want to be sort of continually kind of making, having this engagement, having these conversations, and then this idea of distributed leadership also. If we just depend on our sort of officials and folks in higher up capacities, we're never going to get that representation from the other voices. And we know, like within UN framework and structure, the global South is not represented at all, adequately at the same level as Security Council participation. So things like BRIC, like the BRIC, was it Brazil, Russia, India, China? These are the countries that represent the majority of our population in the world, and India has no representation. Brazil has no representation at the Security Council level. So it's just rethinking about how we reframe these conversations. And then the other thing, just kind of connecting all the dots between what we've been doing today, the power of Google Earth, global imagery, to sort of zoom out and get that perspective of your geographic region, and then share that across the globe with others. Yeah, we have the tools to do that, ourselves, and then piggybacking on what you said, Frank, virtually to then share that story. So I kind of imagine this project I've been working on, trying to look at the other Mediterranean climate zones, the other 4 around the world, to tell the story of all the things happening in Oakland and the Bay Area with respect to urban greening and urban gardens and urban education. And then how does that map over to places like central Chile or southern Australia or Cape Town, South Africa, or the Mediterranean Basin, which have climates just like ours here. I say ours, I'm in New York now, but in Oakland. And then what does that mean? And how do we build best practice across the globe? So these digital tools are powerful, Zoom platform is powerful, the idea of distributed leadership and different ways of approaching running things and understanding contextually who's in charge and what's happening. So some really great thoughts today in connectors. Other thoughts from folks?
I want to quickly dovetail off of what you just said, Eric, and that's another reason why I think that the idea of really having a concerted push to engage public science centers in this kind of outreach is that having been a science museum person myself for 10 years, I know there's a tremendous amount of expertise in terms of presenting technical ideas to the general public, but also being a lot of experience with visualization, which is a critical piece of this.
Agreed. And dome platforms, planetariums can not only be used for looking out at the stars, but they can be used at looking back at the Earth. So 100% agree. Not only the physical assets that public science centers have, and then the expertise, in-house expertise of various practitioners within public science centers, the ability for science communication to happen effectively. We've got so many well-seasoned people in those spaces, so definitely agree. I know we're coming up on time, but last thoughts in the last 5 minutes or so.
I'll just chime in that I think I was in the conversation, Frank, with you last time about that. And I love that idea of museums being hubs. From the UCAR's perspective, there's going through my head that in November is also we're relaunching for the first time our first big public in-person science event. So I'm speaking from my staffing, but I think that having a conversation about it is a great starting point to see. And I was already thinking that we have Summit in Denver area, but I think it should expand beyond that for a hub. There's a lot of great science institutions around here. And one that comes to mind that I know does this kind of work is the Denver Museum of Nature and Science also, because they have a Institute for Science and Policy. with a team that kind of does some of these connections between science and policy pieces, and facilitates events and conversations and webinars and podcasts and that kind of thing. I haven't connected with them recently about this kind of thing, but I'm like, that might also be another good starting point to bring into the conversation. And I don't know if Kristen Uhlenbrock has been involved at all with Clean. I know she's been involved with like Aztec and other things like that, but she's the director of the Institute for Science and Policy Change. So I think there's definitely conversations to be having to move forward on the next steps in terms of thinking what that might look like. And, you know, whether it's this year would be awesome, and because we need to be taking action soon, or if for some reason we can't make it happen this year, like let's look at other events and stuff and see if we can kind of keep building and keep that momentum building on that soon.
And important thing to remember is COP is not the only thing that happens during the year. The SBs are the June SBs are starting to become a big deal nowadays.
And I think just starting where we are, right? It doesn't have to, we imagine these things being huge events, but even if, like Colleen, you're saying, it's at libraries in Alaska and it's just a small convening, small convening in Denver. So, ideally, this thing might take place at Chabot Space Science Center in Oakland. To start where we are and build, but to show this constellation of folks engaging in COP, in November, we had a half a dozen small scale things that are sort of united around this digital engagement with a few key kind of things that we're trying to accomplish as a result of that. I think that's a great starting point. Maybe with that, because I'm on 3% now, I will appreciate all of you and the great conversations today. Look forward to working with each of you in the future and hearing your conversation next week, Mark. I'm glad you're going to be leading the effort.
Thanks, Evan. Thanks.
And Gina, thanks as always for hosting us.
Thanks, Eric, for facilitating even as you're traveling. And thanks everyone for the great discussion.
Yeah.
Have a great
rest of your day.
Great week, everyone. Cheers.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Bye all.